There's no time.
The time is
13
o'clock.
Hey there, everybody. It's episode 127.
Yeah.
Hey, should we do something for episode 150?
Like what?
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, for this episode, I'm wearing my glasses.
I told him that he should wear them.
Because I look smarter.
Well, one, because he looks smarter.
Yes,
and
right.
I said, plus, if I say something like earth-shattering, you can, like, whip them off.
Yeah, put them off and go like
See?
that. Yeah.
That's why. I'm sorry if you just listened to the audio podcast. You missed a really epic moment right then.
I don't make that my new thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Like, you'd be like...
The hell you said.
Yeah.
You just whip them off. Like, I could whip them off too, but then everything will
like
be
a
blurry.
sound effect and shit for it.
Oh, yeah, shit. Now I gotta go find a sound effect for every dun, dun, dun. Like, every time. No, he's gonna keep doing that the whole show.
No, I ain't gonna fuck around with this. I'm gonna put the glasses up.
Yeah, he was like looking at his tablet beforehand, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Are you gonna wear those on the show?" And he's like, "Well, should I?" And I was like, "Yeah, it makes you look smarter. Glasses make everybody look smarter. That's why I wear mine."
I don't need to look smarter.
No, really.
I just need to look hotter.
There's another T-shirt right there. You're making so much work for me with all this little shit you say.
Mm.
I was gonna say I don't wear the glasses to look smarter. I wear the glasses because I can't see shit without them.
Yeah.
Or I can't read without them.
Today we're going to talk about Edgar Cayce.
Yeah, somebody like recommended this a couple weeks back, and I was like, that it wasn't even on my list. And like I said, I have a humongous list of topics, and I was like, this is an amazing thing that I hadn't written this down because he's kind of like the preeminent psychic, quote unquote, or seer, whatever, of the 20th century.
It's almost like a prophet.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of what we consider your kind of standard New Age beliefs
Comes from this guy.
comes pretty much from him, or at least he kind of like codified a lot of it like into a big thing. Like, he, all his stuff about, I mean, he's probably most famous for like his medical diagnoses, but he also talked about like he made future predictions. He talked about Atlantis, all that.
He also left behind a foundation that did a lot of weird shit.
There.
Yeah, did a lot of weird shit after he was gone, including educating Zahi Hawass, the Egyptian guy who ran the damn.
Who's on every fucking History Channel documentary ever. About
Egypt. He's pervy as shit. Did some weird stuff with women, and he's on the run. Last I heard.
I hadn't seen him for a while.
Because there was some kind of corruption going on where he was making money on the side with with his Egyptology gig. I don't know if he was selling antiquities. I think it was more like
there's a lot of that kind of shit. I've read a couple books about that, like the shady antiquity sales market. There's a lot of shady shit.
I think he was, just off the top of my head, if I remember correctly, he was doing weird stuff like stealing other people's work. Like, they would come up with the idea, and then he would claim it as his own. Like,
oh, I totally came up with that.
And also, I think doing things like giving private tours underneath the table to, like, real, notable
particularly
people
attractive people?
And people that paid a lot of money,
Okay,
you know what I mean? He'd take you to places where you really weren't supposed to go.
Where you weren't supposed to go, right.
And that kind of stuff.
So, like, rich people
making money on the side.
Get to go put their grubby little fingers all over shit. That
and of course he's pocketing it. He's
Yeah.
pocketing the money,
Hey.
That's what last I heard. I don't know if it's true, but... And the new Egyptian government was looking for him. But it was Edgar Cayce Foundation that educated him because that foundation wanted access to the Great Pyramids of Giza.
It's because...
That's some weird shit.
I think it's because, like I said, Edgar Cayce very famously wrote, and this is repeated on the website of the foundation, everything like that, made over 14,000 psychic readings about pretty much every conceivable topic. And one of those was that the Akashic Records, or, your great library of human knowledge or whatever that was like, that Atlantis had stored there or whatever. It was like all human knowledge. It was supposed to be
in between the paws.
It was supposed to be like under the right paw of the Sphinx or something like that.
And then they come in there with some kind of a sonar device and they find that there is an empty pocket in that area.
Yeah, I just watched, there was a History Channel documentary that came out, I think it was in 2005. And they specifically mentioned this, and they had the Egyptologist or archaeologist or whatever he was, and he said, yeah, we found what appears to be a chamber, like, underneath the paw, but they don't know what's in there or anything like that. And like I said, I don't think anything's come of it since then, because I haven't heard anything
No,
about
there's
it.
a bunch of no-dig orders around the real famous stuff.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to dig around those areas.
Wouldn't that suck, though? Like, if they... Because if you did dig there, like, what if the paw, like, fell in or something? You'd have, like, ruined the fucking Sphinx.
They have ways of getting that done the right way. It's just that... Yeah, it's just that the Egyptian government wants to be the ones to do it.
Well, fair enough.
And they don't really have the technology, you know what I mean? And then they want to do it themselves. Actually, they say they wanted to do it themselves, but I think they're more kind of like, well, screw that. We're making money with all this tourism.
Well, yeah.
You know, we don't need to be digging. We're making enough money already.
Well, yeah, because nobody wants to go see the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx, and like there's a bunch of like construction shit, or you can't go over there or anything like that. I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah,
they're making more money out of people coming to see it.
Yeah, right.
Than letting people dig around it.
But there's a bunch of mysterious stuff, you know, in the Giza complex. You know, there's some underground things. They know that there's still a lot of stuff underneath the ground.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there is, because you know that was ancient Egypt's big thing, man. It's like we're gonna dig all these holes and we're gonna put fucking all the bodies down there and treasures and all kind of shit. There's probably all kind of fun shit underneath there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that King Ramses made, you know, and all of his sons are in this underground complex. You know, that's all excavated now, or most of it is.
Yeah. The funny thing is that you know, that I just previously mentioned, the History Channel documentary about, ostensibly it's about Edgar Cayce, and it came out in 2005, and I watched it, and the title of it is The Other Nostradamus.
Yeah.
It's like his name wasn't even in the title of it.
Right. Just
and like the first 10 or 15 minutes of it was actually about Nostradamus and about Mother Shipton. And then finally they got around to talking about, you know, Edgar Cayce. Look at me talking about finally getting around to talking about something. Like we can't say that, because, you know, look how long it takes us to get around to talking about shit. But I just thought that was so sad. It's like, can you imagine? I know he's dead now and he can't like get upset about it, but can you imagine, like, you know, 50 years from now they make a documentary about me and I'm like the other so-and-so, like, they can't even use my fucking name? That's pretty sad. Because the thing about Edgar Cayce, and everybody that watches this show knows that I'm like the biggest skeptic ever. Very, very skeptical of psychic stuff, you know, future reading, all that kind of crap. So I don't really put much faith in any of his readings or anything like that, just because I don't think there's any solid proof of it. But I will say that by all accounts, he seemed like a lovely person. And he really seemed like he was doing what he was doing because he genuinely believed he was helping people. I mean, he famously like refused money. Like, he was even like struggling for money most of his life, particularly because he would not take money for his readings. He insisted on doing them for free. Yeah. And so that's why he often had to like rely on investors and things like that who were interested in his work, who would actually pay.
And see, my take on it's a little bit different. I'm not skeptical about psychic stuff. You know, I've seen it myself. You know, poltergeist experiences, near-death experience, out-of-body experiences, things like dreaming true, or having feelings of certain things that would happen, they'd happen. Not kind of like premonitions. And, you know, it wasn't just me, you know, the U.S. Army and the intelligence community was interested in this kind of stuff. And they evidently used it. Whether or not they were able to fully control it, you know, I don't think so. There was something called Project Stargate that the government was involved in about remote viewing, you know, so I believe it exists. It's just that there's a lot of charlatans that try to make a buck off of it. It's easier to fake it.
Yeah. I mean,
you use like magic tricks to fake some shit, make a quick buck, and move on. I think most of the people that can do it without trying, do it by accident. It's just a part of the natural course of your life. And I don't think they can do it on command.
I agree with you on that.
It's spontaneous.
Yeah.
You just spontaneously have a dream, and in that dream you get a message from somebody who is dead, or from a relative, and then you find out later that person had died.
Yeah.
You didn't even know that person was dead. Stuff like that, you know. It's evidently, people have done it.
Yeah,
They're
and I'm
wrong.
not disputing that happens, because I know that it does, and a lot of people have had those experiences. I've had those experiences. I just, like you said, I don't think the reason I'm skeptical of psychics or people that call themselves psychics are because these people are claiming that they can essentially control it, that they can tell you what your future is going to be, or they can suggest, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone can do that. I think if people do have quote unquote psychic abilities, it's probably just something that happens spontaneously.
And it happens to them about them.
Right.
Like, whenever somebody comes from the outside of a situation, goes, don't worry, I'm a psychic, I can solve your problems. And then they do a reading and they'll tell you where the dead body was, where the dead body was buried, that kind of shit. I'm very, very skeptical of that kind of stuff. Maybe it could happen every now and then, but most of the stuff that's ever happened to me and other people who've reported it that sounds kind of matches up with kind of stuff that's happened to me. It's not like that. It's something personal about you and your situation, and it just comes out of left field, like dreaming true or getting a feeling that something's going to happen. Like, man, I got a feeling that that the car's going to break. And then the next day it breaks.
Yeah.
Even though there was no warnings. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like you're way more likely to have quote unquote psychic feelings about
your situation.
Or people that you love.
Right,
Your family, your friends, stuff like that. I mean, that's again why I'm kind of skeptical about a lot of Edgar Cayce stuff, because most of his shit was about people he never even met. He just did stuff through letters. And, he didn't do a lot of his readings in person. So I kind of feel like that's...
I got an exact example. I had a dream that I was flying like a DC-10 or a DC-9, like a plane, like a cargo plane, jet, like a passenger jet.
Yeah.
And I had a dream that I flew it into, I think it was a big old mail building. You know what I mean? Like a big gigantic post office.
Right.
I woke up the next day and 9/11 happened.
I have heard a lot of people say that they dreamed about a plane crash, or they dreamed about a plane hitting a building.
Yeah. And I watched that happen live on the news.
Yeah.
I didn't see the first plane hit live, but the second plane I saw it hit live.
I don't think anybody saw the first plane hit live.
No, I saw the second
because
one
no
hit.
one was recording.
I was sitting there
because why would
watching
you?
it, watching the fire going, man, I think that building's going to fall. And then the second plane came and hit it, and I go, man, this is on purpose. But I had a dream of crashing a plane into a post office.
I've heard that a lot of people had that type of dream before that happened. And what's interesting is when I used to go back and forth, many years ago I used to be married to a Welsh person, so I used to go back and forth to Wales all the time, and I lived there for a brief time. There was a very famous like a mudslide or like a rock slide. It wasn't actually mud, it was like coal slag. And it came down a hill and buried a school and killed a shit ton of children. Yeah. And I actually went to the cemetery there where they buried all the little kids. And I was kind of interested in, it was like a horrifying experience. So I was like kind of interested in the history of that. And apparently the same thing happened. The night before that happened, a bunch of people had dreams about black stuff just like coming over them and them not being able to breathe and stuff.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if there's some kind of a group unconscious. You know what I mean? Like a group unconscious between people, and maybe you can get kind of hints that something bad's going to happen to the collective, or maybe even just to you.
That's really not that weird, because like some other animals have that type of,
like maybe something birds could do, or
or even or even animals, even insects and stuff like that are like kind of like hive mind or like collective brain type of thing. There might be some of that.
Yeah, I was thinking that at the time. Yeah. Looking back on that dream, and I was like, man, maybe it's something to do with the group consciousness.
Yeah.
It's
very
slightly
well may be
outside
like
the space-time continuum.
Yeah. And that was actually something that Edgar Cayce kind of advocated, that everyone was one type of thing. I don't think he used those particular words, but the stuff that he was saying.
Some kind of an interconnectivity between people.
Yeah, and he was. I think he was kind of ahead of his time saying that.
That might go into like the quantum consciousness and quantum soul theory.
Yeah.
That Roger Penrose and what's his name are working on.
Stuart
Hameroff.
Where your consciousness isn't entirely housed inside your brain.
No, it's not so much into you. It's also in kind of like a quantum field around you and interconnected with other things.
That it could be
quantum in quantum entanglement with things that you come in contact with. And which means people and objects.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a quantum internet.
Yeah.
Pretty
which,
neat.
Like I said, doesn't sound
Doesn't sound too-
completely.
Yeah, it sounds like something animals would have.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, we've talked a little bit, I think, on some previous shows about weird animal behavior and like how they seem to know things and stuff
So,
like that.
I'll see comments every now and then in the comment section, bagging on me for being skeptical about this stuff, even though things have happened to me. I'm not skeptical of phenomena. I'm skeptical of certain cases.
Yeah, that's two
Yeah, it's a
completely
big
different
difference.
things.
Right, yeah.
Just because you believe one thing doesn't mean you have to believe all
Right.
things.
All this shit can't be true.
No.
All this shit can't be true because it's contradicting itself if it is.
Right.
That's
what I mean. That's why I thought that was kind of funny. Like, I kind of took the comments off because the guy was kind of abusive.
Like dickheads, yeah.
But like I said, if you say anything mildly dickish, I'm just gonna take you off. And it's like I don't give a shit. I don't have time for that shit. But it seems to me because the implication behind that is because you had a poltergeist experience
that I have to believe everything.
That you have to believe everything.
Yeah.
And those two things are not
right.
That doesn't follow.
That I have to believe in angels. Angels as described in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The Old Testament or the New Testament, because the description's different.
Yeah.
Maybe there is an angelic type being, but maybe that's a creature that is so advanced it's in another realm and it no longer has to incarnate anymore.
Yeah.
Would that be an angel? Or maybe some kind of an elemental spirit that has a real high mentality? Is that an angel? It all depends on what your point of view is.
Well, and the thing about
How
it
you're
too is
interpreting it.
that that's one of the things and one of the reasons why I'm skeptical a lot of quote unquote paranormal stuff or new age type of stuff is because I'm a very logical, science minded person, and if you cannot definitively just define your terms, tell me what it is you are talking about. You can't use this kind of wishy-washy Deepak Chopra kind of language that, that sounds like it means something, but when you think about it, doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
You have to definitively state, this is what I believe, this is what I think this thing is, and then we can test that, or then we can check that out. If you're just going to use all these weaselly, wishy-washy type of terms, I'm not going to follow you on that. My eyes will start to glaze over. I'm like, you're really not saying anything of any substance.
Yeah, and we live in an age of science and reason, We know that things that exist only exist because it's part of the natural world. Well, some of this stuff that I've seen that people call supernatural or paranormal, I've seen it. So I know it's real. I don't really care if anybody else, if they don't believe it or not. So I've seen it, so I know it's part of the natural world. It's not supernatural. It's just that we don't know
what it is,
what the natural world is really made out of. You know what I mean? I think it's, some of the stuff at quantum theory. Some of the stuff that I've heard from that kind of explains a lot of what I saw.
Yeah.
I believe that there is an afterlife, but it may not be the afterlife you're expecting. You know what I mean? It's like another dimension.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not there for very long, or you go there and you don't really have the same identity you have now. That version of you is gone, but your point of view is over there now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're like a playful little creature. You don't have many memories of your prior lives. That may be a possibility. Based on certain things I said, but we're kind of getting off the track. It's just because we don't believe in a case doesn't necessarily mean that we don't believe in a phenomenon.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because people could make up something.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like people get their houses broken into, but it's like people could make up getting their house broken into.
Like I know that poltergeist phenomena is real. For a while, I believed in a case called the South Shields poltergeist, but the more I thought about that case and the situation around the South Shields poltergeist, the less I believe in that particular case. Doesn't mean I don't believe in poltergeist. I just don't believe that the South Shields case was authentic.
Yeah.
Or at least much of it was not authentic, because maybe they just exaggerated or added things to that case in the same way that, and This House is Haunted, the Enfield case. Not all aspects of that case were true. Some, because it had a lot of different witnesses.
Yeah.
And some of the witnesses reported things that didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, for their own fame.
So it's
you
the
know?
same type of thing.
The same thing, but that case did happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Edgar Cayce and about his earlier life. Now, here's something I didn't really know. Like I said, I kind of knew...
No shout-outs?
I really just had a couple brief ones.
Okay.
You know, obviously, new audiobook, Faces
Right.
Villain 2. Go check it out. I usually put a...
Selling real well.
I usually put a link, like a bounty link in the description.
Yeah.
If you're not an Audible member, then you can use that link and buy it and I'll get a bounty.
Right.
You can check out our last movie review, which was Don't Look Now, the Nicholas Roeg film.
Yeah.
One of my favorites of the 1970s. Also, I stated this on the last week's show about Son of Sam, and I also wrote it on Patreon for patrons only. As I said, we're changing up our production schedule. It does not affect when the shows are going to go up, but we're just going to be recording more of them at once so that I can get ahead of it.
Yeah.
So if you are a patron of no matter what tier you're on, I'm going to start giving you a heads up of what the topic for the upcoming week is going to be, what the movie for the upcoming week is going to be, and I'm also probably going to start providing like links to the show like a day early. So just so people will feel like they're getting something. And I'm also going to start doing, as I said, I do a quarterly mail out for $20 plus patrons. I just send out t-shirts or books or whatever. I'm also going to start doing a quarterly drawing of people on the lower tiers, and I'm just going to pick a random name, and if you win the drawing, then you'll get like either the same thing the $20 patron get or maybe like a special gift or something like that. So I'm really trying to kind of up our participation like on the Patreon page, because I know that I haven't been doing a lot of it lately just because I haven't had time and, you know, various other things have intervened. I'm also going to try to start putting like maybe little videos and shit on there. So if you're not a patron and you want to go over there and check it out, you can. Like if you're already a patron, hopefully you will like the changes. Not anything drastic, but I'm just going to try and, you know, kind of get more interaction going on there. And so far, I've gotten good feedback on that, so hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So I think that's about it. So let's kind of start talking about Edgar Cayce. And like I said, I had heard of Edgar Cayce. I think I probably read some books about him when I was a teenager because I was kind of into all that paranormal, like poltergeist stuff and psychic stuff and everything when I was younger. So he's kind of known, like I said, as the 20th century Nostradamus. Is like the, you know, the greatest psychic, the greatest seer. Obviously the one that has the most quote-unquote documentation because so many of his readings were written down.
Yeah, and this guy wrote a lot of material.
Yeah, he didn't write it, like assistants and
right.
like stenographers and stuff like that.
I'm not sure he was fully literate, was he?
You know what? I think that is a misconception because I think that stemmed from, I think it was an old New York Times article that said like illiterate, like has all these, you know, medical, you know, he makes all these medical diagnoses, but he was not illiterate. That is a misconception. Actually, he was quite an avid reader of the Bible and of other books about the occult, about homeopathy, about osteopathy, various other things. So he wasn't a dummy. Like, he only had an 8th grade education, but he was from a farm family, and that was pretty common then because, you know, once you were, you know, kind of in your teenage years, you were old enough to work on the farm, then you quit school and worked on the farm. That's just what they did.
They didn't need educations anyway. As long as they could read, write, and do the arithmetic, that was all they needed. Yeah,
so so I think that's kind of a misconception that he was just this country bumpkin that didn't know anything and couldn't read, but he could read.
They usually continued to read if there was anything to him. So, you know, even though they were from a farm family, some of these guys could get quite good at what they were doing. So he was just a man of his time.
Yeah. And like I said, and one thing I didn't know, even though I knew about his, you know, medical, they actually called him, a biographer called him the sleeping prophet because all of his stuff came to him while he was sleeping. You know, not necessarily sleeping, but like in a supposed trance state.
An altered state of consciousness.
And he claimed that he had no idea what he was saying when he was in the trance. So, like, when he woke up, he would read it and be like, oh, and he'd be, like, surprised.
It's kind of like automatic writing, but it was automatic speaking.
Yeah, it did seem kind of like that. Like I said, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if he actually didn't remember what he said, you know, or if he was just making that up.
And
but
there's no way to cover everything that this guy's done and in the scope of a 2-hour program, really. This guy's... I mean, there are huge libraries of stuff that, you know, that was written about this guy.
Yeah.
And,
many books,
yeah,
many
he wrote a lot of-
documentaries.
His foundation had whole libraries.
Still do.
Still do, yeah. And it's kind of like, if you read Anne Rice, the Edgar Cayce Foundation is a lot like the Talamasca. If you read
Yeah,
it,
that's a good
it's
comparison.
like
It
that.
is very much like that.
or it was supposedly
Yeah.
like that. It's also kind of like a fraternal order, like the Shriners or the Masons.
Yeah.
Even though they're their own thing, and they're spiritualism, kind of like spiritualism.
Yeah.
Although I don't think they were super heavy into seance.
No, that didn't seem
No.
to be a thing that was... Well, because Edgar Cayce himself was very devoutly Christian, so he had a lot of conflict within himself about whether these psychic powers were, legit or if they were from a godly source, I guess, was how he
Right.
kind of would have termed it. And he also, had some stuff about... when he started to accept reincarnation and things like that, which a lot of the church group that he belonged to did not like that because they thought that was unchristian, and they, so he kind of got a little bit of hot water there.
From what I know of him, my take on what he was doing, it was a situation kind of like self-hypnosis.
Yeah.
And kind of like accessing the quantum record, or like the Akashic.
He called it the Akashic record.
Akashic record.
He did call it
and
that.
pulling information or knowledge from the universe, something very similar to kind of like remote viewing and astral projection.
Yeah.
It was an ability like that.
Because he actually termed, when he was asked to specify where he was getting this information from, he either said, like you said, it was from the Akashic record, or that he was pulling it from the subconscious of the person for whom he was doing the reading.
Yeah, which Hammeroff and Pembrose might have an alternate explanation of what that is. You know what I mean? Like somebody's quantum soul or quantum consciousness interfacing with someone else's quantum consciousness because there's a quantum entanglement.
Yeah.
And in the universe too.
Yeah.
So
But
you
yeah,
have to look at
so
what Pembrose says about it.
another thing too that I didn't actually know about him was that he was kind of ahead of the curve on this whole holistic health type of thing, where it's eating right and acid alkaline diets and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of a big trendy woo-woo thing kind of now, but back then it was kind of ahead of its time, and he was kind of like the first person to say eat this and that and the other thing.
People ate crap back then.
Well,
they ate lead.
Yeah. We talked about that in the Son of Sam show, but that was probably why everybody was crazy murderers back then, because they were all just fucking lead particles everywhere. So Edgar Cayce was actually born in 1877 in a really, really small, rural town in Kentucky. As I said, his parents were farmers. They had livestock, wheat, corn, tobacco, like he usually did in Kentucky. And from an early age, I guess he was seen as something of an odd child, or at least according to his biographer. They said that he talked to little folk, which I assume are fairies or what have you. He apparently talked to his dead grandfather. Now, one of the documentaries I saw, the Wikipedia page did not say this, but one of the documentaries I saw said that Edgar Cayce had actually seen his grandfather get killed by getting thrown from a horse and then drowning in a pond on the property. And that henceforth he had been able to speak to the ghost of his grandfather, from that time. But some of the other sources I read didn't see that. But all of them said that was one of his early experiences, that he claimed he had been able to talk to his dead grandfather and all these little people and stuff like that. So when he got a little bit older, when he was preteen or something like that, he got super into religion. He got super into the Bible. Like I said, he was not illiterate. He would read the Bible all the time. He was very into it, and he started actually when he was a teenager. He started teaching Sunday school at his regular church. So he was kind of really, really engrossed in the whole biblical Christian thing. Now, evidently, when he was about 12 years old, so the story goes, he was reading the Bible out in his little thing in the woods, his little house or little hut or whatever he had out there, and a woman with wings, presumably an angel, appeared to him and said that she said, "I've answered your prayers, what do you want more than anything else in the world?" And reportedly, Edgar Cayce said, "I want to help people." That was his wish. He wanted to particularly help sick children, but he's like, he wanted to be a missionary. So the angel presumably was like, can do. So right. Now, again, the story goes, the day after this happened, Edgar Cayce was apparently, he described himself as a quote-unquote dull student. He said he was never a very good student. He was like, not stupid, but he didn't really care about his studies. He was always like too busy talking to his dead grandpa and what have you, and like talking to the little people. So he didn't really care about learning anything. So his dad was always kind of like, "Why are you so dumb?" And it was like kind of, beating the crap out of him. And he's like, so this one night after this angel appears, evidently he's studying his spelling, and his dad is like, "Why are you're not doing it right," and blah blah blah. And the angel comes to Edgar Cayce and says, "Hey, if you have a sleep on this, we're going to help you out." So then Edgar Cayce falls asleep on the spelling book, and when he wakes up, he knows all the answers.
Now, this story comes from Cayce himself, or it comes from his followers?
This was in, as far as I know, it comes from his biographer.
Okay.
So it may have come from him directly. I'm not entirely sure about that.
Yeah.
This is just probably one of the most widely circulated stories about him, was that he said that when he would sleep on a book, he could see all of it, like he had a photographic memory of it, but he had to sleep on it.
Yeah, when he woke up in the morning, he knew that everything was in the book.
And he knew everything that was in the book. So that's probably one of the more famous stories about him.
Whether or not he was actually tested on this, he was probably never really tested on this.
Right. And like I said, the biography says, from that point forward, his teachers all said, he was the best student we had, even though he was kind of a mediocre student before.
I have a feeling with this story right here that this is kind of a story that followers, and students of his would tell about him.
It does sound like that,
in the same way as Scientologists tell stories
about L. Ron Hubbard. Sure.
It sounds like that.
That's what I was thinking. Right. It does sound like a very, miraculous...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like one of those weird stories about, Jesus when he was a kid and he did all this, amazing shit. You know what I mean?
There's a chance that Cayce never really said this. Or he mentioned it, just told us a tale, and they kept repeating it over and over again.
That's kind of what I feel like that's kind of what this is. Now, apparently his ability to diagnose medical illnesses and various types in his sleep did not come about until he was a teenager, about 16 years old, I believe he was. Now, it actually first happened to him. He was playing a game at school or whatever, and he got hit by a ball in the spine. And apparently after that, he started, quote unquote, behaving strangely. He goes to sleep, and while he's asleep, he says what the cure is for whatever this is that ailed him. So the family says, okay, so they prepare the cure, which I assume was some kind of herbal or folk medicine, which most of his cures were. And evidently, then when he woke up, he was totally fine.
Yeah, you know what? I'm now seeing it. L. Ron Hubbard copied a lot of Edgar Cayce. L. Ron Hubbard healed his own imaginary illnesses, his imaginary battle scars.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yep.
So he probably got that from Cayce.
Yeah.
Whether or not Cayce did it or not, there's probably no witnesses. It's just the legend. This is the legend.
Yeah, that's why I said the story goes, because this is the very common legend that's told about Edgar Cayce's early life.
And they sound like the legends that surround a religious figure.
Yeah.
And,
that from a very early age, we knew they were special.
Right.
They could do this, that, and the other thing. It was super amazing, and everyone said it was super amazing.
Technically, you could call Cayce a cult leader. He wasn't a malignant one, though, but he was like a cult leader.
Yeah. Now, evidently, even though this ability purportedly did not reveal itself until he was in his teenage years, again, when it was his own illness or his own injury that he was supposedly curing, it didn't happen again until he was in his 20s. So there was some gap where they didn't really know what was going on. So after this point, like I said, they lived in this like little rural town. Later, they moved to like a slightly bigger town called Hopkinsville, and lived there. That was kind of when Cayce finished his education and dropped out of school. So like I said, and that was not unusual for the time because he was just working on his family's farm. But it's the kind of thing where pretty much the rest of his life, he would just be constantly struggling for money. Even though he supposedly had this great talent, and a lot of people tried to exploit it, but he does seem to have had, at least according to all the accounts, he does seem to have had like some kind of integrity about it, or he said it doesn't work when I'm just doing it for profit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I can kind of relate to that. It's almost kind of like it's faith-based.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're doing it for someone else, it helps your faith and helps you to manifest these effects.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for profit, you don't feel good about it, and you can't manifest it. That's what he's claiming. That's what he's claiming.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see.
And it does seem to be that in later years when he was doing readings for people, and some people when he was in a trance, and like I said, he said that he didn't remember what he was talking about or anything like that, and would ask him things like, hey, what's the outcome of this horse race going to be, or something like, so they could gamble on it. He would give you an answer, but it wouldn't necessarily be the right one.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he said that if it wasn't done specifically to help people, then he couldn't verify like the accuracy of it, I guess is what. So it's not like it didn't work. It's just that he might give you a wrong answer. I don't know if he was just covering his ass or...
From what I remember about Edgar Cayce, all the readings I did about him, he was, according to witnesses, very good with medicine.
Yeah.
That's what I remember about it. According to the witnesses, he would tell you how to heal yourself and what to drink and what to eat.
Yeah.
And your problems would go away, according to these witnesses.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of a problem I have. Like, I'm not saying that all of this is bullshit, but I do want to point out that a lot of the stuff about him and about his, like, quote-unquote miraculous cures and stuff like that is all anecdotal.
Yeah, you can't prove it or disprove it.
And pretty much, yes, a lot of it was recorded, because it was, everything he said was written down by, like, stenographers and assistants and whatnot. But you don't know, like, a lot of the cases that are, like, in his library and stuff like that, there's no follow-up. It's like, Did these people actually do that and it cured them? Did they die?
When did they die?
Because there was some things later, like he would get a letter that said, hey, can you heal my this and that? And by the time he got to the letter, because he got so many, by the time he got to the letter, that person was dead, but he didn't know that. Right. You know what I mean? Which you'd think he would know if he was actually psychic.
Yeah, and another thing is that, it's been documented that placebo is a real effect.
It is.
So...
If you believe strongly enough that something will work, it will work.
Right. So is Cayce actually just kind of giving placebos to people that do work, or is we don't know.
Yeah, and like I said, most of his stuff was like folk remedies.
Right. All these people are long dead. You can't talk to them. You can't exhume them and do autopsies.
Nothing.
It's difficult to do a true investigation because you might give the people's names, but you don't know if these people really existed. You don't have the social security number or the addresses. So
yeah, and the thing too is that when they did all these people, they would take the person's name and they would black it out and they would give everyone a number before they put it in the library. You know what I mean? So they do have all the original letters that were sent to him there, but they blacked out everyone's name because for privacy concerns, I would imagine, or they don't want people to check up on them.
Right.
I don't know if I want to. I'm not going to go there because I don't think he had any nefarious intent at all. I'm not saying that other people around him did not, but he does not seem to have had any kind of.
There didn't seem to be any motive for financial gain in a lot of
this.
Like
I said, other people around him did try to cash in, but he never really seemed to. So I don't want to like attribute any nefarious motivations to him in particular because I don't think he had any.
Now, he did have kind of a cult following of a bunch of people around him.
He did, yeah.
All right. And we don't know how honest they were.
That's what I'm saying.
See, that's
So I'm just saying, I'm not shitting on that guy. It's
Right.
like, but some of the people around him might have been shysters, and they were trying to
make a buck on the side,
make a
or
buck
make him,
off of him.
maybe even write fake books in his name to try to sell. There's no way of knowing.
And maybe the fact that he was such a nice person,
It was easy to get over on him, maybe.
right? That's what I mean. It
But
might have
we're
been.
not there. This is we're all just
it might have been easy
surmising.
to take advantage
We're all
of
just surmising this.
So okay, so like I said, at this point he's in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He actually got engaged to Gertrude, who was like the love of his life. They were married until they both died. He was a very active church member. Like I said, he taught Sunday school. He trained missionaries. He did all that kind of stuff. And as I said, because he was such a devout Christian, he had a lot of, at first he had a lot of problems with this supposed psychic ability that he had, because he didn't know if he was supposed to be doing it. You know what I mean? Because there's that whole biblical admonition about...
Yeah, is he cheating? Is he going against God's rules?
Yeah, so this seems to be like a conflict that really kind of, it was really something that was on his mind a lot, it seems like.
Well, because technically it'd be something kind of like alchemy or witchcraft, and that would be a sin.
Right.
So,
Right.
he's probably worried whether or not he's committing a sin.
Yeah, he did seem to be.
Right.
And like I said, in later years, some people that, members of his church where he taught Sunday school and stuff like that, actually absolutely did think that, and they thought that, it's from the devil or it's witchcraft or whatever, and they didn't want him teaching their kids at Sunday school and stuff like that. So there was that whole thing. So around 1900, Edgar Cayce and his dad, they put together this company. They were going to sell insurance. Now, shortly after this happened, Edgar Cayce gets this really, really bad case of, most sources say that it was laryngitis, and mostly lost his voice. Now, if you're an insurance salesman, you kind of need to be able to talk, and he could not. So at this point, he kind of had to move back in. Like, I think the business ended up failing in the end, but he had to move back in with his parents, and he's like, okay, well, I need some work that doesn't entail me talking so much. So he actually went to apprentice with a photographer at a photography studio. And this is actually something that he ended up doing for most of the rest of his life. Like, he would open his own photography studios and stuff like that. And that was kind of his main source of income, was doing photography work, because he actually got quite good at it. And if you've seen like any of the photos that he took of his wife, or like, they're actually really, really nice. So there was that whole thing.
That was big business back then. That's what my grandfather did on my dad's side. He's a photographer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was high-tech shit back in those days.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was like super expensive too,
Right, yeah.
because it's like, it's not like now where you just like snap
snap picture and it's
40,000
done.
pictures
Yeah,
and
no.
then throw away the ones you don't
No,
like.
you could have a photography studio and a shop there and make a lot of money.
Yeah. But yeah, so he started doing that. Now, the following year, he met this stage hypnotist magician type of thing, who's called the Laugh Man, Mr. Hart. And he had heard about Edgar Cayce not being able to talk. I think he could still talk, but you could barely hear it. It was like very, very raspy. And he kind of like was like, oh, well, I guess my voice is fucked up forever. It's like I can't talk anymore. So this hypnotist hears about it, and he says, well, maybe if I hypnotize you and give you a post-hypnotic suggestion that you get your voice back, maybe that will work, or maybe hypnosis will work. So he actually hypnotized Edgar Cayce, and allegedly, when he was in the trance, he could talk normally. But then when he woke up again, his voice was all fucked up again. Now, because Mr. Hart, the Laugh Man, said that, well, I have to go on to the next city. I don't have time for this, to do this. But he's like, I think the reason that it didn't work was because you didn't go all the way down into hypnosis. You were like fighting it or whatever. So he suggested these other hypnotists that he go to. So he starts going to other hypnotists and trying to figure it out. But then he meets this guy who is like an osteopath or hypnotist type dude, named Lane, Dr. Lane, I guess. I don't know if he was an actual medical doctor or not. He was one of those kind of questionable kind of doctors. So he's like, I think what you should do is you should hypnotize yourself and then it will cure you. You see, like, because if someone else is doing it, it's not working, evidently. So
yeah, hypnosis and mesmerism was like a big thing.
Yeah, and actually, they even mentioned that, like, on a lot of sources, that Franz Mesmer, that was like a big thing, and there's a lot of that shit going
around. They weren't sure about the powers of the mind. They didn't know what was possible. Which shit.
Right, exactly. So evidently, this session, or this series of sessions where he was able to go into this trance or self-hypnosis, he diagnosed his own ailment and was able to cure himself. Now, it wasn't like immediate. They said that he did have some relapses, like, a couple years in the future, and it would come and go, but that overall it did end up working. So after this presumed, like, self-hypnosis cure and stuff like that, Dr. Lane, who was kind of interested in Franz Mesmer and all those other types of people, said, Edgar Cayce, you should take this on the road. Maybe other people can benefit from you going into a trance and, like, diagnosing their illnesses and, prescribing a cure or whatever. Now, Edgar Cayce was initially quite reluctant because he said, I don't know what I'm saying when I'm asleep. Yeah. And he's like, all it would take is for me to say something fucked up while I'm asleep, and somebody does that, and then they die, and then I'm a murderer. He's like, because I don't know anything about medicine, or so he said. So I don't know what I'm prescribing. Somebody could be taken to be poisonous. I don't really know what I'm doing. So he didn't want to take it on for that. And his wife, Gertrude, actually agreed. But he was able to be convinced that he ought to do it. Now, as I said, he very famously learned very quickly, very early on, that he did not even have to be in the same room with a person. All he needed was, like, their name and where they were. And he could supposedly go into a particular trance, and he would know what was the matter with this person and what could be done.
I think he had to know the symptom, though.
No, well, actually, no. I think all he said, because he said he didn't want to know about them ahead of time. At least that's what most of the sources I read said. That all he needed to know was their name and where they were at the time of the reading.
And I guess so he could get a bead on what their problem was and everything. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I'm sure that some of the letters that they got, like, probably described what the problem was, which in some cases, that wouldn't be quite as impressive if you just read the letter and they're like, yeah, you've got X, Y, Z, whatever.
I also didn't know that he claimed not to know anything about medicine.
Yeah, that's what he claimed, but like I said, I kind of dispute that because
I can remember some of the things, some of the advice that he gave a long time ago. I don't remember the particulars, but I remember thinking, boy, how did he know that?
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff seemed to have been like a good remedy for that problem. You know what I mean?
Right. But
I remember thinking that, but I can't give you an example.
That's the thing. And like I said, most of the stuff he prescribed was pretty common folk remedies that were pretty well known at the time. And I think even though he said that he didn't know anything about medicine, he did hang out with a lot of doctors, a lot of osteopaths, a lot of people who were in that line of work, particularly like, nature healing type of stuff. He read a lot of books about that. He read like a lot of like Madame Blavatsky and people like that. So it's not quite as amazing as it sounds. Like, he wasn't a dummy. Like I said, he knew this stuff.
Right. I got a feeling he had medical knowledge.
I think he might have, or at least he picked some up from people he knew or things that he read.
That's still kind of the same as having medical knowledge, though.
Yeah.
He had medical knowledge, I believe.
Because a lot of the, I read some of his readings of people and like of their illnesses and the cures and stuff like that. And some of it, one, is kind of vague, like a lot of psychic shit is. And a lot of it, even when he did say something specific, it sounded like something that he had, remembered from a book or remembered from like one of his osteopath friends saying it or something like that.
I seem to have remembered, this is a long time ago, I may be wrong, but I seem to remember him telling somebody to drink like a little bit of iodine in some water. And I don't remember what it was. But I remember thinking at the time, that's probably an iodine deficiency.
Yeah.
He's talking about.
And like I said, I'm not real sure.
Stiff,
how, and I'm not real sure like when people wrote to him, because most people that he did readings for had written to him for help, and they might have described
don't hold me to that.
their
Though. I may be
symptoms.
thinking about somebody else. It's been a long time since I've actually.
So, like I said, it
gotten
might
into
not be
Cayce
as
stuff.
amazing as it sounds
Right.
because it's like he might have had prior knowledge. And then maybe, I'm not saying he didn't go into trances and stuff, but maybe in a trance or in an unconscious or altered state, he could kind of remember like all these bits and pieces of information that he had picked up over the years and was able to like cobble them together into something that seemed like to legitimately help the
Right.
person. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it was necessarily psychic. Maybe
don't-
he was just very intuitive.
When I was young, I read a lot about him, and I don't remember ever coming away with any kind of negativity associated with the guy. I thought he was a good guy.
He seems like a very, very
yeah.
nice man.
So,
And honestly, he and Gertrude actually had 3 sons. One of them died when he was only 2 months old, which a lot of skeptics will point out that he did a reading on that kid, but it didn't save the kid. But 2 of his sons survived into adulthood, and they later went on to, do his foundation and everything like that. I think they both passed away now. But they were, as far as I know, both of them were interviewed for some of the documentaries I saw, and they also seemed like very nice people, and and they had nothing but nice things to say about him. Interestingly, his 2 sons, when they were older, they published a book about him that I think was called like The Limits of Edgar Cayce's Power or something like that. In that book, they claimed that he had an 85% success rate, but in this book, interestingly, they concentrated on the quote-unquote 15% of cases where he was wrong. So I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it.
okay.
So they weren't, like I said, I got no impression that Edgar Cayce himself was a charlatan or that he was like a bullshitter or anything like that. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
he
that
wasn't
people...
an LRH. He wasn't an L. Ron Hubbard.
Right. He wasn't like trying to like,
Make money and stab
right,
people.
like inflate himself into being anything. He seemed very humble. He
Right.
did seem to genuinely want to help people, and he did seem to believe that he was actually helping people. Whether the people around him were taking advantage or were trying to,
ride the
blow
gravy
him up
train
into
or
something
whatever.
bigger than he was, that's another question. But I never got the impression that he was any kind of crook or any kind of huckster. Not
What
at
I
all.
remember, what stands out, what I remember about the guy, what I thought was cool back in the day, was all the little stories and predictions he made about ancient Egypt, the Sphinx, the pyramids, and all that stuff about Atlantis.
Yeah.
That's
He
what
talked a lot about Atlantis.
Yeah, it was. I haven't heard it in a long time. It's just from memory. My memory says that it was bullshit,
Yeah.
but it was pretty cool bullshit about the Atlantis.
Well, according to...
And the thing is that maybe he's talking about something else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe he's talking about, because I remember he was given some locations where he was saying what parts of Atlantis were. And if I remember correctly, later on, they did find some artifacts or things that looked like artifacts underneath the sea in that area. But it was, I think it was a natural formation, though. It looked like a road.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it-
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Did you come across that?
No,
in
but
your research?
honestly, from what I've read, I believe that he perceived Atlantis to be not just like some dinky ass little island. He perceived it to be like a continent.
A continent?
That it was like, and it was in the Atlantic.
Yeah,
You
so
know what I
kind of
mean?
like that other guy. He thought that Atlantis may have been Antarctica, when
Yeah.
Antarctica was closer to the equator.
Yeah.
That might have been, that it kind of fits that. What's his name? He's the guy that writes all the books about ancient Egypt and everything. And he's got
shit.
into the big ayahuasca thing. So he's doing TED Talks.
Oh shit, I
You
can't.
know what I'm talking about.
I do, but I can't
yeah,
think of it
I can't
right now.
think of his name. He wrote some wild books too.
My favorite prediction that Edgar Cayce made about Atlantis was that I believe he said it would be in 1958, maybe 1968, that we would discover an Atlantean death ray.
Atlantean Death Ray in '58.
Did that happen? Who knows?
Maybe it
Maybe
did.
they're covering it up.
Maybe he's talking about some of the radio wave weapons that the United States and
Maybe.
the Soviet Union were trying to figure out.
You
Radio
could
wave
you could
weapons
massage into that.
and
Sure.
ultrasound.
That's kind of like a death ray.
Yeah, and ultrasound or microwaves.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people don't know, but the Japanese were working on a microwave weapon back in World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were actually bombarding people, monkeys, and evidently some have surmised POWs with a bunch of microwaves to cook them to see if they could do it. And they were going to put this thing on a damn tracked vehicle and send it out to the coastline and just microwave incoming American ships during the invasion. You'll see this weapon in the Godzilla movies. You know the tank with the
Yeah.
damn tube with the radar dish on the end of it?
Yeah.
That is the microwave weapon they were trying to build in World War II. Yeah, whoa. Yeah, and I think it's
I'm gonna
shooting.
cook you like a hot pocket.
Yeah, and it's shooting. In the Godzilla movies, it's shooting a lightning bolt. But that's the microwave weapon they were trying to build in World War II.
They're gonna blow you up, just like all the old urban legends about people putting the poodle in the microwave and blowing it up. All right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's take a break right now, and then when we come back, we will talk more about Edgar Cayce and about his prophecies, and also kind of go maybe into a little bit of the skeptical type of thing, because I read a lot about that too. So we will be back in just a few. The Faceless Villain, a collection of the eeriest unsolved murders of the 20th century, Volume 2, includes cases spanning the years from 1960 through 1979, featuring such infamous crimes as the triple homicide at Lake Bodom, the family massacre known as the Good Heart Murders, the serial killings of the Zodiac, Bible John, Jack the Stripper, and the Freeway Phantom, the slaughter of dozens of women and girls along the Highway of Tears and the Texas Killing Fields, and the mysterious death of suspected spy, the Isdal woman, along with dozens of other fascinating and horrifying accounts. Buy it now from Amazon in print, Kindle, or audiobook format.
Oh, look. It's all full. There's treats in there, huh? Yeah? Can you get them? Can you get them? I know you can get them. I've seen you do it. If there's treats involved, you're gonna be all about it. You gonna get them? Good girl. Good girl. You're a genius. Yes, you are. You're a genius. Why you chucking it, though? Why you chucking it? Yeah, I know. You got your treats. That's super good, right? You're dope, dude. There are more of them in there. Oh. She likes to eat them with her hands for some reason. She's very dainty. What's up?
Okay, everybody. Jenny's got some new shirt designs up. 4 of them. Really good ones, too. Atlanta Ripper, Who Put Bella in the Witch Elm, the H.H. Holmes Murder Castle, and, of course, Demon Child, because man said he could. These are updated designs. I think they look really cool. Jenny did a great job on them. Really fun making, Jenny?
They were very fun, and thank you very much. I think they came out very good.
Yeah, they get really good. They're very high quality shirts. Jenny and I wear our own shirts at certain times when we're trying to put a spotlight on ourselves, and you can put a spotlight on yourselves. If you go ahead and pick up one of these shirts today, you guys are going to love them. Links in the description, www.zazzle.com at 13 o'clock.
Yeah, so go check out our store at www.zazzle.com/13 o'clock. We got these 4 cool new t-shirt designs, plus all our old ones if you'd rather get one of the old ones. But these ones are awesome, and you should check them out.
They're also available in women's cut, and they look really cute. Jenny's got some.
So thank you. Go check them out. Okay, we're back talking about Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet.
Yeah.
Now, at this stage, he actually moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and there were some doctors that were kind of like sympathetic to his cause, and they kind of wanted to figure out what it was that he was doing, so they wanted to do, you know, not like experiment on him, like cut him open like a lab rat, but like, you know, kind of watch him under some more controlled conditions.
See if there's anything to him.
To see if there's anything to it. Now, evidently, by all accounts, these quote-unquote experiments did not go well. And Edgar Cayce said that I'm not going to do that shit anymore. So that was that whole thing. He didn't want to be, I guess, poked and prodded or experimented upon. He just wanted to do his shit in peace or whatever.
Nothing survives about what exactly they did to him or anything?
Not really. Like,
Okay.
not that I know of.
All right.
Now, he actually had opened up a photographic studio. This one, the first one burned down. And then he opened another one, and that one burned down also. It was like a year apart. And this ended up bankrupting him. Now, his friend, there was this guy named Wesley Ketchum, who was a homeopath. And he's trying to talk Edgar Cayce into, like, taking money for his readings, because he never has. Or at least, like, opening some type of institution or some type of hospital or something like that to help people and start charging people. Because, like I said, you know, at this point, Cayce and his family were broke because his photographic studios have burned down. But Edgar Cayce still did not like to take money for his readings. And like I said, I feel like it was probably because, one, I think he felt weird about having this gift, like I said, because he was kind of like a hardcore Christian, and he didn't know if it was like, you know...
If it was a sin.
copacetic or not. Also, I think, like I said, I think when he did things for financial reasons, I think he felt like the accuracy wasn't as good, or it wasn't as helpful. So he would always like refuse. So he always like tried to find some like workarounds. So what they actually ended up doing was that Ketchum said, okay, well, we'll start a company, but what we're going to do, instead of giving you money for the readings directly, I'll just, we'll pay for you to have a photography studio, and you can make your money doing that, but then like we'll use the money, and then the readings can come. And so you still get money, but you're not getting money for that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
They would go through a back channel. They were going to launder the money.
Yeah.
They were going to launder the money.
So I kind of feel like there was a lot of that going on, like particularly later, like when he opened like his hospital and he opened his institute. Like it would be a kind of thing where he didn't, like I said, he didn't like to take money for the readings directly. So what he would do, he's like, oh, well, if you come to the center, you pay for a membership.
Right.
And then you can get readings and you get access to all these other things. But, the membership money would go back into the foundation or whatever. So there was that whole thing.
That's a fair way of doing it.
Right. That was, fair enough. It's like he wouldn't take money directly, ever, as far as I know.
So he laxed up and the psychic forces could now flow.
I guess. Yeah. But like I said, now some documentaries... It's kind of like
if you're in the men's room and you're trying to go and
you're trying to pee and
this guy next to you, you know what I mean? Putting you under pressure,
Well, the same thing happens to women as well. Well, hi, baby cookie.
Yeah, what you think? Say anything, baby
cookie? she's like,
probably
no,
gonna try to move the camera like she did.
She's like, no, I'm just gonna stick. No, okay. She's just laying down behind the laptop. She's being a good girl. You be a good girl, okay? Yeah. Well, women have the same thing. It's like I don't like going to pee in a public bathroom when there's like a bunch of people like on either side. I'm just like, I don't know. I feel weird about it. I wish they would put more noise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Based on my experiences, these paranormal effects, if you want to call them psychic abilities, I don't like that term.
Yeah.
These paranormal occurrences are kind of like that.
Yeah.
If you scrutinize it too much, it won't happen.
Yeah.
You got to be relaxed.
Yeah.
Which, and the Army even thought the same thing with in Project, what was it called, Project Stargate. One of the end results of that whole project is that they didn't say. They said, basically, to paraphrase it, they say, we're not going to call bullshit on psychic abilities. But we know that they don't work under the stress of warfare, and they don't work in combat because you can't do it on command reliably. Well, especially under stress.
Like I said, it's too unreliable.
Yeah.
It's nothing that could be counted
on. That was the Army's takeaway. Now, here's a weird thing. They're doing something still kind of like a little bit kind of like psychic abilities. They had a training program where they would send guys through a virtual reality situation, and some guys would get a bad feeling with the images that they were showing that they were walking into an ambush. And some guys were better at predicting an ambush than others, even though they were just seeing pre-recorded video.
Right.
That's weird.
Well, some people have better intuition than others. Like I said, it's just like any other ability, and some people.
And the
are
Army
be better
couldn't
at it than
explain
others.
why, because the video content of a situation that was going to have an ambush initiated and one that wasn't was equal.
Right.
There were no visual giveaways.
Right.
And they noticed that some guys had a better ability to predict when the video would show an ambush.
Yeah.
And they put those guys as frontmen.
Well, as you would.
Yeah.
And so I feel like something like that.
I think that's special forces only.
Yeah, because it does seem like, like I said, and they have this even like in sports and everything like that. If you start like overthinking things, thinking about how all the ways you could mess it up.
Right.
You need to. I mean, even like athletes and stuff talk about being in the zone. That means you're like not thinking about it. You're just doing shit without thinking about it.
It's automatic.
And that's when you do your best shit, when you're not thinking.
And evidently,
thinking's good, but it gets you in trouble.
Evidently, the Army knew about this too, and a lot of their elite guys in special forces and in their, evidently their little Delta teams and stuff. Some of those guys went through some training like that.
Yeah.
Weird, huh?
Yeah.
They talked about that also in remember that series that we watched, The Dead Zone.
Yeah.
Where Johnny's helping military intelligence. That was based on Project Stargate. Find terrorists.
Yeah,
where they were.
There was 1 or 2 episodes like that where he was like helping them out.
And that's based on something that really did happen.
The TV series, not the movie. But so that's the thing too, is that, so like I said, They had one son who lived. They had another son, like in the middle, named Milton, and he died. He was only 2 months old. Now, like I said, a lot of skeptics have pointed out, oh, why couldn't he save the baby? I've seen different sources about that. Some said, oh, maybe he was like reluctant to like do reading on his own baby or whatever, but the baby died. Now, shortly after that, his wife Gertrude got tuberculosis. And allegedly, the doctor said, yeah, she's going to die. She's got like a week to live. And she supposedly, now Gertrude, she was a supportive wife. They clearly loved each other very much. But she seemed a little reticent about the whole psychic-y thing. Like, she did help him out, like, in later years. She would do the readings and would write stuff down for him and stuff. But she doesn't seem to have been super jazzed about it. But she did ask him when she was apparently dying to do a reading. And supposedly, she was cured. Even though the doctor said she was going to die and had, quote-unquote, given up on her. Apparently he did a reading. Like I said, I don't know how true that is, but that's like what all the sources say, that they said she was going to die, but she ended up not dying of tuberculosis. She actually outlived him by a few months. So at this point, like I said, constantly short of money. He's at this point asking for donations and stuff to continue his work. He actually also invented a card game, which I believe is still sold, even though I'd never heard of it. It's called Pit. He did it like a wheat trading type of thing. It's like a card game. I'm not sure how you play it, but everything I read said, yeah, they still sell it, or they still sell some form of it. So he's apparently the one that invented that. I don't know how much money he got from it, but he did invent that. That's still around. So at this stage, he gets in the papers. He's like, there was like a very popular magazine that wrote like a big thing about him. And so this is kind of when shit started pouring in from like around the world. People were writing to him from far away because here's the guy that can like just cure you from a letter, and he'll tell you like.
So he became a living legend.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, at first, he was only doing 2 readings a day. He said each reading took about 45 minutes. Because he said, it took a lot out of him. I guess it was very psychically or, mentally straining. The sad thing was later in his life, he felt so bad that like the letters were getting backed up and everything like that, that he went up to like 8 readings a day. And they think that that's eventually what killed him, was just like overwork. But now one thing, like I said, at this stage, he had mostly been doing like medical diagnoses. Like people were writing him like, I have this illness, blah, blah, blah. But then in the 1920s, like early 1920s, he had a friend named Arthur Lammers, who was kind of into metaphysics and stuff, and started asking him about, bigger questions about human consciousness. What are we doing here? What is God? What's the nature of God and stuff like that? And so Edgar Cayce started going more in that sort of metaphysical direction. Even though, like I said, I don't think he really meant to, but if he was in his trance and somebody asked him about that stuff, he would apparently give a long, detailed answer that, his stenographer, whoever, would write down, and then he would read it afterward and be surprised. What the fuck? I said all that? Yeah. Okay. You know what I mean? And I think I found a quote from him. He's like, I said all that? I couldn't have said all that in one reading. That was like a quote from him. So his friend Lammers was like, I've been studying metaphysics for years, but what you just said when you were in the trance, that totally sounds legit. He basically said stuff like, because like I said, he was very into Christianity, so he was very like anti-reincarnation. He didn't like want to know anything about it, but he eventually kind of came to the thing where all religions are one, or they're all like seeking the same thing. Yeah. So if it gets you closer to that, then it's okay. You know what I mean? So he kind of like opened up to like everyone is pursuing the same thing, even if it's like, Buddhism or it's Christianity or it's what, it's all good. As long as you're getting to the same place. Like, you're just trying to be a better person. Right. You're trying
they're all in the same genre.
Right. You're trying to, just get to a greater spiritual awareness, which, there's nothing wrong with that. That's that's a nice message. So he kind of eventually got to that place. So
that's New Age.
That's what I mean. That's why he's sometimes called like the father of New Age, or the father of like holistic medicine. I've seen him called that too, because like I said, he was one of the first to advocate this whole mind body, everything is one, and we all need to like what you put in your body, and it like makes a big difference and all this.
Which actually checks out with a lot of my experiences.
Yeah.
The big mind body link. Everything he's saying. You guys know. There's something to that.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, one thing that he had always wanted to do was, as I said, his primary goal seemed to have been, or so he said, that he wanted to help people. He wanted to open a hospital where he would diagnose people, but there would be actually medical professionals there that would do the cures that he was, advocating for. So he had been trying to do that for quite a long time. They started various foundations where people would, interested people would give them money. They had a newsletter and all that kind of stuff. So they did actually have enough money to open a hospital. Problem was that in one of his trances, they had actually wanted him, I believe they at first wanted him to open the hospital in Dayton, Ohio, or maybe Selma, Alabama. I can't really remember, but because he lived in both of those places. But for some reason, one of his visions said, no, you have to open it in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which was at the time kind of it's like a resort town. Like not a lot of people lived there. He wanted to go there because he thought that the ocean was, helped with his abilities. And also that the sand was like curative somehow. He was kind of this is kind of why I'm always kind of like skeptical of this type of stuff, because as much good shit as they say, like, yeah, you shouldn't smoke so much. And he did say things like, everything in moderation and blah, 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 which is like normal, reasonable things.
That goes back to ancient Greece, though.
Right. And, he said reasonable things, but then he would also say like healing crystals and blah, blah, like that kind of shit. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you could have just stayed right here, but then you had to go over there, So
I never bought into the crystals thing.
Right. So it seems like he did kind of, because some of the cures that he advocated
if I remember
were gemstones and things like that.
If I remember correctly, a lot of his Atlantis visions had to do with them using crystalline technology. He
did like a giant solar crystal that was,
Right. And he was claiming to see the past in these visions and seeing Atlantis and all this weird Atlantean technology.
Yeah.
I gotta say, it's straight out of 1800s science fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, straight out of that.
Which,
I would think that it's highly unlikely. Some of the things that he said about ancient Egypt sound a little bit more likely, and a couple of them actually turned out to be true. There is something underneath the paw of the Sphinx.
Right. Whether it's like some Atlantean library or the Akashic record or whatever has yet to be determined.
And I think he said there were a couple other chambers inside the Great Pyramid that are yet to be discovered, and he said
that's not a crazy thing to say.
Yeah,
because that's a big fucking pyramid.
That's starting to come true.
Yeah.
That they're pretty sure there's some pretty big chambers in there undiscovered still, using some kind of radar. There's some empty spaces in there. But it'd be cool to see what's in there.
Yeah, I'd be
interested. And there's
these
air shafts.
Yeah.
Going through it, weird.
But yeah, so that's the thing. They actually did get. I don't believe he personally had the money to buy a house, particularly in what was then not a very popular resort town, Virginia Beach. But one of his supporters, who I think was a stockbroker, he actually ended up buying them a house there. And actually, Virginia Beach is where their world headquarters still is to this day. That's where their institute is. I think they have another one, might be in Houston, I want to say. Houston, Texas, maybe Austin. I can't remember. Somewhere in Texas. But their main one is still in Virginia Beach, still. So, like I said, his remedies for stuff, even though he had all these other doctors supposedly on staff at this hospital, were very folk medicine-y. You know what I mean? It would just be like, hey, take a rabbit and turn it inside out and put the blood side like on where your cancer is and stuff. It was stuff like that.
Yeah.
So some of it was probably fine and harmless. Like, a mud bath isn't going to hurt anybody. Not smoking so much isn't going to hurt anybody. But some of the stuff was a little quacky. sounding, I have to say.
Crystals and all that, yeah.
Yeah, so there was a lot of that kind of stuff. And some of it was probably actively harmful.
Yeah, like what?
Well, I'm just saying, like, stuff like, drink some ammonia or, like, things
Drink
like
some
that.
ammonia, yeah.
Shit like that.
Yeah.
Where I don't know if he actually said that in anything, but I'm just saying for an example, stuff that's probably not all that good for you. It's like, hey, this will kill your cancer if you fucking drink bleach or whatever.
I knew an old guy, he was an old gunsmith, machinist. He used to drink hydrogen peroxide.
I've heard of people that did
Yeah.
that.
And they put it in water, not
Yeah.
pure. And he just said, oh, it helps your respiration. And I don't know if that was just an old person thing. Maybe that was from, that could have been from something like Edgar Cayce.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Now, I've never heard of anybody drinking it, but when I was growing up, my grandparents and my dad would gargle with it.
Okay. No, this old guy.
I don't know if that helped. I used to clean my ears out with it.
He'd pour a big old glass of water like that, and maybe about 1/4 of it was hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah.
And he would also do things like take a glass and then drop a couple drops of iodine in it. Drink that, And it's good for you. And you know what? He lived a long time. Died in his sleep too. His name was Jim Graves.
Although, like I said, I'm always kind of like, medical shit, man. It's just so. It's really hard because there's a lot of shit that you can do to your body that will probably not hurt you, at least in the short run.
Right.
And actually, by the time it does something bad to you, it might be so long ago that you don't even remember that shit happening to you. So, you know what I mean? Or you don't remember doing it. You don't remember that being harmful. But there's a really lot of, particularly where medical shit is concerned, there's a lot of, oh, well, I was sick and I did this particular thing and then I got better, but you didn't necessarily get better because of that particular thing. You might have gotten better from like a lot of different things. Maybe it just went away on its own. Maybe it was something else that you did. Maybe, you know what I mean? But people have a tendency to, and this is why like I took several psychology classes, and my psychology professor was very big on correlation is not causation. Just because something happened after something else, that doesn't mean that caused that.
Yeah.
And he's like, but that's a very common thing for human brains to do. It's like, oh, I had a cold, and then I ate a cup of chicken soup, and the next day it was gone. So the chicken soup cures a cold.
Well, Big Jim said that the hydrogen peroxide helped oxygen get into your red blood cells. They told me. And he said he could breathe better after it. That's some weird shit, man.
Because it's bubbly.
I don't know. Look,
it was like
Big Jim knew my grandfather. My grandfather almost raised him back in the day.
Yeah.
And he just was and he was kind of a strange guy, big machinist, and
yeah,
worked on guns for the police department.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they drank hydrogen peroxide.
That stuff is so gross. Like, I've gargled with it a couple times because it's supposed to, it kills germs and stuff. So I guess it's not going to kill you if you just gargle with it and spit it out.
Yeah.
But honestly, I couldn't even do it for that long because it tastes so yucky.
Yeah, he'd swallow it down. That and iodine.
And also,
he was into all those cures.
Yeah.
I once saw him burn a wart off of his thumb using some kind of acid, mercuric acid.
Yeah.
And he put it on there and it started snapping and popping, and I was going, God damn, man, I need to put a little bit more on there. And he just,
it's alright, I'm badass.
And it's just like, until it got down to his face, oh, it's hurting now. That's it. Weird.
What's in Compound W, I wonder? Do they still sell that wart remover thing? That's probably acid.
He had all kinds of strange poisons in there. He had arsenic and cyanide and stuff, things used for bluing guns and weird crap like that. You could kill yourself at his shop. You had to be careful.
I kind of feel like here's the thing. Like, so much of like the past, everything was poisonous.
Yeah.
People would put anything in their fucking bodies without even like thinking about it. I mean, even the makeup that women use because they wanted to look paler. Because if you had a suntan, that it looked like you worked in a field and you were poor, so nobody wanted that. So people would like put shit on their faces like to make their faces paler. I read about this in. I don't know if you guys know about, and I should do a show about this because I'm so fascinated by this, the subject of the very famous John Singer Sargent painting, Madame X. And that was something that she did. She was very known for her beauty and for her very, very pale, like porcelain skin. And a lot of people have speculated that she put shit on her skin, like lead-based type of stuff to make herself paler, and that might have contributed to illnesses and
I'm gonna
death
trip out
later
all
on.
the Europeans. You could be sitting there at any minute talking to old Jim, and he'd reach behind him like that and pull out a 45 1911 and open fire inside of his own shop, shooting over the top of all the lathes and all the milling machines that he had into a snail trap that he made, which is a bullet trap with a target
Yeah.
over the end of it. And just start open fire in the middle of his own shop. It was like the size of a large garage. He'd be talking to you, shooting, pow, pow.
Although, why
He'd
would
have
you do
reloading
that?
machines.
It seems kind of rude.
Oh no, he loved it. Everybody go in there, was into guns.
Yeah.
He had a Lar Grizzly. It was the first 45 Winchester Magnum pistol I'd ever seen. He had that thing cut down to the size of a 1911, which gun guys know exactly what I'm talking about. It was beautiful. One of the first guys ever knew it. He also had a Koonin 357 Magnum that he actually modified it to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, Koonin 357 Magnums never worked. It looked like a 1911, but it shot 357 Magnum. It was never really intended to cycle in a pistol like that.
Yeah.
Because that's a revolver cartridge. But he got it to work. He cut enough off of it and polished enough to get it to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were expensive back in those days. It was in the late 80s. Okay, on to the show.
So anyway, so the hospital itself, they actually had planned to build kind of a university type thing, or like a library for all of Edgar Cayce's like teachings. They also wanted to focus on something they called study groups, which actually Edgar Cayce got this idea when someone asked him, I believe it was a family member that asked him, was like, hey, why can't we have them psychic powers like you have? And he's like, yeah, maybe anybody can learn to do this, and maybe we should like organize study groups where people can like practice and they can like get up on it. And like I said, this is something that they still do to this day. So that was kind of something they wanted to do. Now, the hospital was only open for a couple of years. Then came the Great Depression. The hospital ended up closing. However, the association that they started, the institute that they started, which was called the Association for Research and Enlightenment, ultimately, is still around to this day in Virginia Beach. Like I said, it's their headquarters. They have a very nice building. It has a really nice big stone labyrinth in the front. There's classes. They do lectures and all kind of shit. And it's still there if you're kind of into that kind of stuff. But so, there was that whole thing. Now, there was a whole bunch of other stuff about the institute and, like I said, the classes and he kind of got more into doing, more metaphysical stuff and kind of got out of the medical stuff a little bit. I think he still did it, obviously. And actually, when World War I came around, that's kind of when he started like upping his workload, because he found that people started writing him letters about their relatives that were missing in action and were asking him where they were or if he could help them or whatever. And he felt so bad that he was getting all these letters and he wanted to help all these people that he basically just started doing all these readings like all the time, and ended up not really getting any sleep or not getting any rest or anything like that. So apparently, like I said, in his lifetime, he did over 14,000 readings. They didn't really start keeping track of his readings or writing them down until like the 1920s. But by all sources say from June 1943 to June 1944, he did almost 1,400 readings. And in August of 1944, Edgar Cayce pretty much just collapsed because he was so tired from like overwork and everything. Then this I thought was kind of amusing, but like in a sad way. Like he gave himself a reading, and in his reading he said, the quote was, "Rest until well or dead."
Yeah. Okay.
Couple months later, sad to say, it was dead. Yeah, he died. He had a stroke. And a couple months later, he died. His wife, Gertrude, died 3 months later. According to their son, who, like I said, I saw an interview with him when he was much older, obviously, on one of the documentaries, and said, after he died, she didn't really have any reason to live anymore.
So she shut down.
So
she died.
just, shut down after he died, and, that was kind of the end of that.
It's weird. Animals do that, too.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
It's understandable, like I said, and particularly these two, because they had been married such a long time. She was such a big part of his, not only his life, obviously, but his business, his livelihood. They did have a secretary. They called her a stenographer, but she was actually I mean, she wrote down in shorthand, like, every single thing he said and, like, kept all the records, like, all the letters she filed, everything. I mean, her name's Gladys Davis, and she's, like, kind of the reason that so many people remember him, because she wrote every single thing down.
Okay, so she kept his legacy alive.
Right, pretty much.
Okay.
But like I said, Gertrude, she was always there. She would be there when he did the readings, particularly in the later years, like after some of the other like osteopaths and stuff had fucked off or done other things. You know, she was always there next to him, like helping him out. So, like I said, it was kind of one of those things where once he died, she was like, well, I guess that's it for me too, because she didn't have anything else going on. Okay, now all that said, obviously, there are a lot of skeptics. There was a lot of controversy about Edgar Cayce's claims, about all the stuff that he said. Like you said, he very famously had a lot of shit to say about Atlantis, that he described as like a very large continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He actually said, and forgive me if I'm not getting this right, but it did seem like he said that between the years of 1958 and 1998, that both the east and west coast of the United States would be destroyed. He specifically pointed out New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. They'd be destroyed by being inundated with water, although Atlantis would kind of rise to the surface, right?
Okay.
So obviously that didn't happen because, you know, we're 20 years removed from that. So he made predictions like that. He also said that Atlantis had been powered by a giant solar crystal. Like I said, he famously claimed that in 1958 the United States would find a death ray from Atlantis and that we would use it. Like I said, we don't know if that's really true or not.
Yeah.
He also had some weird ideas about races. Like he subscribed to the idea that there were 5 human races and they were all separate creations, which seems kind of a biblical thing, you know. So
yeah, they all kind of believe
so that doesn't
anyway.
surprise me. Like a lot of the prophecies that he made, the Nostradamus-y prophecies that he made, seem particularly biblical. Like the shit that he said about you know, the end of the world or things like that. Now,
stuff he got out of Revelations.
That's what I mean. They all sound very much like Revelations,
Okay.
which a lot of Nostradamus' shit sounded like that. You know, Mother Shipton's shit sounded like that. It just sounded like they were reading Revelations and then kind of changing the wording a little bit.
Right, to
And
confirm
saying,
it.
Yeah, like at the end of the millennium, like lake of fire, blah, blah, blah. Like all this other, like they were just taking it right out of the Bible, but kind of like making it sound a little bit different. So it sounded kind of like more plausible, I suppose. So
more original.
Yeah, so like a lot of his stuff kind of sounded like that. Now, one of the documentaries that I saw on the History Channel, and like I said, this came out in 2005, the History Channel, which used to be fairly historically accurate, but now just seems like it's all
Monster Week, Bigfoot, Shark
Bigfoot,
Week.
ghosts, whatever. I haven't watched it for years, so I don't know.
Not much history on it.
It's I feel like it's just gone the entire like reality road.
Not much music on MTV. They go with what makes
Is
movies.
there any? I don't think there is any.
No.
And reality shows, like I said, they're very cheap to produce, and people seem to like them, or they did, you know, when that whole switch happened.
Around. Yeah, I think cable's kind of winding down.
So this particular documentary that I saw, which came out in 2005, they stated, okay, first of all, they stated erroneously that that Edgar Cayce had been involved in like a company to dig for oil, which from my other sources, that was true. Like I said, he didn't like to get into shit for financial reasons, but apparently this one person was able to convince him, hey, why don't you tell me like where to dig for oil? We'll like have an oil concern or whatever. From my other, cats are fighting. The other source I said, you know, yeah, they were in that business for 3 years and they lost all their money because Edgar Cayce's predictions about where the oil was were all wrong.
Right.
Which was in line with what he said. When I try to do it for profit, it doesn't work, or I get wrong information.
Which, you know what, that is kind of an easy out, though.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, don't come on here and get me try to guess these lottery numbers. You know, and
because if you're wrong, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I thought you said you were psychic, motherfucker. Pow.
Right, yeah. Why aren't you a millionaire? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do it for money.
Right. So, yeah, it does seem like an escape valve.
Right.
But the History Channel documentary it actually just glossed over things. It's like, yeah, he like said where all the oil was, and they were right, and they made all this money. I'm like,
But
yeah,
that's not how it
that's
happened.
not what I heard.
Okay.
But you know,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not shitting on you, History Channel. Not much. Anyway.
Well, you know.
But probably that's not
some
right.
of those programs are quite deceptive. You know.
Not even quite deceptive.
Yeah.
They're a lot deceptive.
Yeah.
Because even
Ancient Aliens is one of them that
Yeah.
comes to mind.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I watched that History Channel documentary, and I'd watched another one that had come out earlier that was actually sympathetic to Edgar Cayce.
Yeah.
That specifically came out and said he opened up this oil business with the other guy, but every single prediction he made about where the oil was
Right.
wrong. So if even a documentary that was sympathetic to him said that he was wrong about that,
Right. I'd go with that.
so I'd go with that. Because
Yeah.
the History Channel was just like, yeah, they made all this money. I'm like, no, they didn't.
He was a good guy. He was not a
Yeah.
charlatan. He was not trying to do what L. Ron Hubbard did and make money off of a big cult. He was just trying to heal people.
I do really feel
and-
like that was his main focus in life,
Right.
was just trying to help people.
And I kind of think there was something to him to a certain extent. I mean, if you're trying to see visions of the past in Atlantis, you know, even if you could do that, I'm going to assume that your visions are going to be really, really contaminated with a lot of your own ideas. So
Yeah.
your vision of the past might be something that can't be translated and written down accurately. You know what I mean? It's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of emotion to it, probably.
Right.
You know, kind of like a dream. It's going to be a dream-like vision, so it's probably not going to be accurate. So in his defense, if he was seeing the past, maybe it wasn't accurate. Okay?
Yeah.
And then I believe he thought he was.
Yeah,
I
I never got
believe
the
he thought he
impression
was.
that he was knowingly deceiving anybody.
Right,
I
yeah.
never got that
I believe
impression.
he thought he was. And I believe that he believed that he was healing people.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think the best quote-unquote psychics are one that actually believe that they have psychic powers.
In his defense, there didn't seem to be anybody mad at him. So most of the people that dealt with him were satisfied with the results.
Yeah.
I kind of think he was the kind of guy that if you met him face to face, you'd like him. And if you had a problem, he'd give you some good advice that would probably work out.
Yeah.
I kind of have a feeling that he was a guy like that.
I never, in all my like reading about him, I never came across anybody that said that motherfucker.
Right.
Everybody said he
Right.
was a lovely, lovely man,
Right.
which I'm sure he was.
So,
Like I said, and I never got the impression that he was deliberately trying to defraud anyone
Right.
or anything like that. I think he legitimately did believe he
Yeah.
had that, and he was legitimately trying to help
So
people.
just on the back that he wasn't asking for a bunch of money and that there wasn't a lot of people that hated him, I'm going to say there was something to it.
Yeah.
You
Even if it was just he was very intuitive, or maybe he listened to people when no
Right.
one else did.
Even
or,
if it was all placebo effect.
yeah, or that too.
You know.
It might have been.
Right.
Because here's the thing where a lot of skeptics, like, Martin Gardner wrote about him, Michael Shermer wrote about him. They're like, we're not saying that he didn't go into trances or anything like that, but, we're saying that he probably gleaned this information from things that he had read or things that he had heard,
Yeah.
but he was like misinterpreting and like kind of, rearranging the information in a way that seemed like it was prophetic or seemed
Right.
like it was coming out of nowhere when it wasn't actually. Because he was like a big reader, like I said, even though the New York Times called him illiterate, quote unquote. I saw the headline. He was not illiterate by any stretch of the imagination. He had read Carl Jung. He had read Madame Blavatsky. He had read all that stuff. So he understood the stuff about, kind of a, human consciousness type of thing where everyone could kind of plug into it. He understood, various medical terms. He understood stuff. He was friends with osteopaths and stuff. So he knew like the terminology. So he could like repeat that back to people in a way that made sense to them. And, if their illness was perhaps not that dire, or if it went away on its own or whatever, and they did what he asked them to do, and it, maybe it didn't do anything, but maybe they got better afterward and they attributed it to that. Because the problem is that all of the stuff about him is, as I said, anecdotal. It's all testimonials. It's all, and
Right. So
as
you
they say,
can't really nail it down.
anecdotes are not data. You
Right.
can't, You know, there's no double blind studies. There's no, there's no way of checking up. And a lot of the stuff about him comes from people who knew him, biographers, people who were friends of his. So how much of that stuff is accurate, there's really no way of knowing. And like I said, all the stuff that was written down about the stuff that he said when he was in a trance, you don't know what happened to that person that wrote that letter that said, oh, they had cancer. And like, he said this, that, and the other thing. You don't know if that person died or not. You don't know if they did the treatment that he told them to do. You don't know any of that.
Right.
So it seems like as much as, yes, his writings were voluminous, like everything that he said, but there's really no way of checking up on most of it. So there's no way of knowing how much of it
was a long time
was
ago.
helpful or accurate.
It was a long time ago. They didn't have mass communication, or telecommunication was kind of difficult back then. But we do know that he wasn't being sued by a lot of people.
Yeah.
That kind of goes in his favor.
He did get arrested for fortune telling, but I think he got off on it.
Okay.
But because that was illegal in some states then.
There doesn't seem to be any complaints about him.
Well, not that I could find.
Right.
But like I said, you're dealing with people that want it to be true.
I tend to believe that he is a mixture of folk remedies that were effective.
Yeah.
Placebo stuff. And good bedside manner. Be a good way to say it.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
I think he had a good personality when you met him face to face, and he made you feel better, and he did help you and tried to help you. You know.
Yeah.
And he had a good success rate.
Yeah.
For one reason or another, be it a folk remedy that he knew about, or if it was a placebo thing. Maybe the problem wasn't sickness, maybe it was in your mind, and the placebo
and maybe just resting or taking a mud bath, or maybe that helped, because maybe it was like stress related.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that kind of shit going on.
So I'm just going to kind of wrap it up. From me, I think he was a successful healer.
Yeah.
All right. For some reason.
In the sense that he genuinely seemed to care about other people's welfare and did want to help them.
Right. Now, he wasn't a surgeon.
No.
Okay, we're not saying that. You know what I mean? But
well, at least he wasn't pretending to be one.
He wasn't pretending to be a surgeon.
He wasn't pretending to be one.
He was a certain
He was just
kind
giving
of doctor.
advice.
He was kind of like a general practitioner.
He was just giving advice. You could take it or leave it.
Right.
So he wasn't... I mean, yes, some of the advice might have been...
it was like Bones or McCoy from Star Trek. He's just a country doctor.
Yeah.
He was like a general practitioner.
It's like maybe some of the advice he gave was probably... could have been detrimental to the person. We don't know. I'm sure it was in some cases because some of the stuff he prescribed was a little iffy. But... there's no way of knowing that at this point.
It didn't seem to kill him, though.
But, but we don't know that.
We don't know that.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there was a lot of readings, but we don't know exactly.
There weren't any complaints, though. No one ever accused him.
Well, if you die, you can't complain.
But the relatives.
True.
The relatives.
But maybe the relatives didn't know. Yeah. So I'm just saying there's a lot of factors that could be... Right. This is why you need to take somebody that has that talent. You have to put them in a lab and test them like in controlled conditions, because otherwise you'll never know.
If anything like that happened, it was by accident. I think it wasn't. Cayce wasn't trying to kill him. He was.
Well, and he did seem to worry about that. So he wasn't a monster. I mean, he did have a conscience.
This
and
cat is asking to go out. I can understand. Will you relax?
That's the other cat that's Beijing. Yeah. She's like coming in here going,
"Come
on!"
Very, very forceful. I want out.
She's kind of bitchy. Yeah. she's old and not having it anymore.
Fuck your show. Let me out.
She's not that old. She's 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's not having it anymore. So, like I said, I kind of wanted to... There was on actually Edgar Cayce's like the association like actual official website. They have like some prophecies that he made that haven't been fulfilled yet. Just kind of your standard stuff about how humans will live a really long time. We'll invent a perpetual motion machine. Second coming type stuff. Like I said, a lot of it's very biblical. You could tell it comes from like a Christian
from that time
worldview and from that time period. He makes prophecies about really obvious shit like, conflict in the Persian Gulf. I'm like, yeah, what else is new?
Yeah, that's going on a long time.
That's been going on a long time. It's like every, prophet worth their salt is, that's a pretty safe bet. Also, kind of stuff like that. And we also mentioned the Akashic records and all that kind of stuff being discovered and whatnot, which he says is under the paw of the Sphinx.
So now that you kind of put it in the opening, you said he was the other Nostradamus. Now I'm kind of seeing that he was a lot like a Nostradamus.
Although I really wish
like
they
an
had called it
American
something
Nostradamus. Although Nostradamus didn't really, as far as I know, have a reputation for healing people, did he?
Well, he was a doctor.
Yeah,
he started out as a doctor.
He was a doctor. Yeah, I guess
he became a prophet later.
Yeah, okay.
Which was kind of the same thing. I mean, Edgar Cayce was obviously not trained as a physician. He didn't supposedly know anything about it. He started out doing that kind of stuff, just like folk medicine type stuff, and then later went into the whole prophecy thing, you know, on the advice of others, as far as I can determine.
Yeah, you know what? You would say folk medicine, you know, it kind of denigrates it. In a way, you know, a lot of folk medicine, there was something to it. A lot of the drugs.
Well, yeah. Oh, no,
I'm
not. I don't mean to denigrate it at all. I do think that a lot of stuff.
But a lot of people do kind of denigrate it, you know. A lot of the folk remedies, okay, actually had medicinal reasons for them. You know, I mean, they're using things that are like aspirin or anti-inflammatories, and you know, so
the shit does work.
Some of those folk remedies worked,
but some of it
was just
bullshit.
Yeah,
and some of it is just, you know, it's that kind of thing where it's like, oh, I feel a cold coming on, I'll take a vitamin C tablet. That doesn't do anything.
Right.
It doesn't do anything. But I mean, it's not going to hurt you.
Right.
It just doesn't do anything.
Well, it might improve your situation from a placebo effect.
From a placebo effect, because you feel like it's
better,
going to feel better. So, it's you can't shit on it in that sense, because the placebo effect is a real thing. It has been demonstrated, so that is a real thing. So I think that's kind of what was going on here. Like I said, I never got the impression that he was trying to, you know, fuck anybody over or try to get money out of people, because he apparently never really did try to do that. He was just trying to help people, and I don't know if he really had any psychic powers or any kind of special powers or anything, but apparently a lot of people think he did, and a lot of people think that he helped them, so I'm not going to get too upset about it. You know, and like I said, his foundation is still around to this day, so if you want to take some classes in ESP or something like that.
And there is something underneath the foot of the Sphinx, of the paw of the Sphinx. I would like to know what that is. He did call that.
Yeah.
Although if you call out enough stuff, chances are some of them are going to hit.
Right. That's another thing too, is that from a statistical standpoint, particularly if you're a psychic, and one of the first things, and this is one of the first things that a skeptic will tell you too when they're doing cold readings or hot readings or whatever, they're like, make a lot of predictions, talk a lot.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're going to come up with something that's going to hit, and people will forget everything that you fucked up, and will just remember
and then
the one thing that you got right.
Starts narrowing it down to that, into that channel.
Because that's just the way human brains work. Like I said, you can fuck up things all day long, but the second you get something specific right, that's the only thing that.
But then the psychic can come around and says, "Well, that's how psychic powers work."
Well, yeah, but that's of course that's what they're gonna say. Just like how they always say, it's like, well, it doesn't work like when you try to like.
You're thinking about it too much.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. So let's wrap up this show about Edgar Cayce. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I can't remember who requested it, but thank you for requesting it, because I probably wouldn't have thought of it on my own, even though he's like super famous, but I don't know why I
we
didn't
wouldn't
think
have thought of it.
But so anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. And remember, if you like the show, to like, share, subscribe on all your social media. If you'd like to financially support the show, please go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/13 o'clock podcast. Like I said, I'm going to try to interact more with the patrons. So, you know, there'll be new stuff coming, new videos, new early access to episodes and stuff like that, so go check it out. If you don't like Patreon, but you would still like to financially support the show, you can give a one-time donation at our PayPal account, which you can find. There's a link on our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a little link in the sidebar that'll go to a PayPal account if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Also, remember, our regular episodes come out every Tuesday, and movie retrospective, usually old movies, that comes out every Friday, and our 13 o'clock matinee show, which is 3 new movies in the theater, that comes out every Sunday. So check them out if you haven't already, and we will see you next time.